This new topic looks at databases, and in today's lesson we're going to start a database, but first of all we need to understand what a database is. So your title for today's lesson is What is a database? Before we move on with the database work, we're going to do a little bit of knowledge recall, and you should be able to say what is it called when you save a file in a format that can be used by other programs. In your ePortfolio you should find a file that you can answer these questions in, and we have got the question from this unit of what is a database. You can have a go at answering that one now. What is it called when you remove unwanted parts of photographs? That one you can answer. And thinking back to the start of the term when we did HTML, or start of the year when we did HTML, what does this HTML tag do? And that's the B letter here. So what would that do in HTML? So you need to pause the video, open up your ePortfolio and answer those questions, and then you'll be able to move on with today's lesson. So hopefully you've got the answers. Export. You've got, for a database, a collection of information that is organized so it can be easily accessed, managed and updated. We'll look more about this in today's lesson. If you're removing part of a photograph, then you are cropping it. And at the start in HTML we looked at the B, which stands for bold, so that'll turn your text or your writing bold. So moving on with that, we're going to look at what a database is, and we've got this chap here called Mr. Smith. Now Mr. Smith owns a shop, and in his shop he sells DVDs, so that's what we need to understand for the background information for this. So his shop for DVDs, he's going to need lots of information about his customers. So he's got all these different customers and he needs to store information or store data about them. For example, their name, their address and their telephone number. Now he hasn't got a computer, he does everything on paper. So he does this the old-fashioned way, and this is one of the differences with a database and a paper filing system. We're going to look at this today. So he does his on paper, and what he does is he fills in these pieces of paper, these cards, that have the information about the customers on them. So it has the customer ID number, so then it has their first name, their surname, their address and their telephone number. So he fills these cards in with all the information that he's going to need about his customers. And then what he does, he puts those into a box so that all the records are kept safe in the box. The problem is, it's not ideal, and the reason for that is that it could take a long time to find a customer in his box of records. He'd have to search through all of them to find the customer that he wants. He could alphabeticalize these, put them in some sort of order that speeds it up, but there are issues with that. If a customer changes their address or any information, then the cards very quickly can look a mess and be hard to read. It might be hard to read his writing, what he's written over it with, and the information can become difficult to see and use. And sometimes he might just lose a card. He might take a card out to update it and then forget to put it back in, and cards can get lost. Again, when he puts cards back, he might not put them in the correct order, and cards can very quickly become out of order. So we can see here that Jane Smith is at the front of his pack of cards, when actually it should be much further on. So things can end up in the wrong order. And if he did drop his box, then all the cards will be out of order, and it'll be an absolute problem for him and his company. Now this is another issue with databases. We keep databases on computers, so database of all the information, and what we can do is we can back that information up and keep it safe somewhere else. If we do lose the original, we've got a backup. With this paper-based system, it's very difficult to keep a backup of the data. So Mr. Smith really does need to move his paper-based filing system to a computer database, and that's what we're going to look at today. So how it's done before, in a filing cabinet with files, and the records are on bits of paper that went into the files, and then the files went into the filing cabinet. If we're using a computer database, we're going to use exactly the same information that needs to be stored. And each chunk of information is called a field. So when we're using a database, we call these fields. So customer ID is a field, their first name is a field, the surname is a field, the address is a field, and the telephone number is a field. So it's really important that you remember this term here. For the chunks of information, they're referred to as fields. Now, the advantage of a database, usually on a computer, is we can tell it what type of data the information is going to be. So the customer ID, we can tell it that it's going to be a number. The first name is going to be text, the surname is text, and the address is text. When we look at the telephone number, we're actually going to make that text, and there's a reason we make that text, and that's what you need to kind of have a think about. Why do we want the telephone number to actually be text? Now, the reason for telephone numbers being text is that often telephone numbers, or usually telephone numbers, start with a 0. And when we write numbers, we remove the 0. So the computer cannot handle that 0 at the front. So we need to turn it into text. If you think about a number, we can add numbers. Whereas a telephone number, we tend not to add them together to get a different number. And also, telephone numbers usually have a space in them, just like letters do with writing, so that's why they're text rather than a number. So once we've got all our information about one customer or one item, so all these fields together, this becomes a record. So a record is all the fields of information about one item. So this is the next term that you need to understand, a record. You need to remember that, and you will be writing that in your ePortfolio shortly. So here we have a record with 5 different fields: the customer ID, the first name, the surname, the address, and the telephone number. In a computer database, we create a primary key, which is a unique number that will not be the same for anybody else. It's individual to this customer ID. So that's what a primary key is. So you do need to remember that, a primary key. So 2 people can have the same first name, 2 people can have the same surname, but no 2 people can have the same primary key, which is the customer ID. So as we've already said, it's a unique code number, the primary key. Not 2 people can have the same primary key number. So here are some customer records for Mr. Smith's database of his customers, and you can see how it all fits together in a table with a customer ID, the surname, the first name, their address, and the telephone number. And this is what we're going to create today, not for Mr. Smith's database. You're going to create your own database for a different topic, but you can see how it appears in a table of information. Now with that table of information, it's really easy to sort that table alphabetically by surname. So again, we have the table of information. We can now just arrange it so it's in alphabetical order by surname. So that's one of the advantages of a database, the fact that you can sort it by whatever field you wish to sort it by. And then you can look for all the telephone numbers that start with a set number, so all the ones of that area number, and they all appear together. So it's very easy. You can organize your data in a computer database very quickly and easily, and we'll show you how to do that in due course. And then you can search for specific information. So I could search for all the information for William Sykes. I could search for that and all his information will come up. Or here I'm searching for all the information where the surname begins with a P. So if we go back a stage and look at all our customers, we've got, when we look in the surname, we've got Bill Peters, we've got Peter Pan, and we've got Ivor PC. So all these ones start with P. When we search for those, that's what gets left in our table, and we can see that information. So searching and sorting is a real advantage to a computer database. Again, if we know there's a 45 in the telephone number, we can search for this information. And this is what the police do with car registration number plates. They might not need to know the whole number plate. They can just look up part of the number plate, and then they can find all the cars that have that part in the number plate. So you don't need to know every bit of information to find the record that you're actually looking for. So with a computer database, we can then ask it questions, and questions in a computer database are called queries. Any search we do is called a query, and we're going to be doing queries in a couple lessons time where we'll be searching our database for information. So you should now have the background information you need about a database, and you've got certain questions that you're going to need to answer that are in your ePortfolio. Now these files are saved for you, so you can answer these questions from your ePortfolio. You can pause the video while you do them, but you need to say what is a database and the use of the database. The next question you need to answer is what is a field, record and a file. So you can look back through this video or through the PowerPoint to find this information. And what are the advantages of a database? And remember, we've gone through those when we looked at the differences between a paper-based filing system and a computer database. So you do need to pause the video and answer those questions. The next part of the lesson is for you to start thinking about your database, and you're going to be creating a database about superheroes. So you need to write a short list of superheroes and what are their superpowers. You can add that into your ePortfolio. So superhero's name and what is their superpower. You can either use ones that you're already aware of, or you can make some up. That information needs to be written in your ePortfolio, and you can have 5 minutes to write this information. So pause the video and add that information in. Okay, we're going to create a superhero database, and you've probably got information like this already. So you might have written this in your ePortfolio with a superhero's name and what their superpower is. We've got a few extra fields here. So we've got their age, we've got hair colour, eye colour and their gender, and superpower. Now, you think all superheroes have got superpowers, but if we think about Batman and Robin, they don't actually have superpowers. So they're left unticked. So this is a Boolean field data type where we can have it either on or off. Most of them will have a superpower, but occasionally superheroes do not have superpowers. So that's what we're going to create, and we're going to show you how to do that in a couple of moments time. So let's just have a recap. We've got our field names along the top here. We've got a whole record of all the information about one character. We've got fields here going down. So all the information in one field. So we've got a gender field, an eye colour field, a hair colour field and an age field, and so on. So you've just got to get used to this terminology. So using your superhero field names, we're going to create the database. You might have these field names, you might have other field names, that's up to you. You can add to this as we go along. But what we're going to look at is first of all what Access is going to look like. Now Access is a computer database. And when we open up Access, I'm going to open it up for you in a moment, we have this bit here, which are all our objects in the database. So all our tables will be in here. Any searches we want to save will be in here. Any forms we want to create are in here. Any reports we want to create will all be listed in this section here. So this is where you need to look out for your work. Then when we click on one of the objects, we'll see it in this middle bit. And this is where we're going to be able to design our fields. And at the bottom is where we can define a few rules. So we'll come back to this in a moment. First of all, we are going to open up a table in Access. So you need to open up Microsoft Access from Computer Drive. It's probably under the Microsoft Office tab, and then you need Access. And when I open up Access, this is what I see, and I can just choose a blank desktop database. Now it's going to ask me to save that. I can call this Superheroes. So just give it a name, Superheroes, and I'm going to save it in my documents. Make sure you save it in your work. And I've just created my database. So as I said before, this is the objects here, and I've got a table 1. Okay, with this table we've got an ID, and along the top here I can put my other fields along here. But I'm going to change the view. I'm just going to go to Home, and there's this button here with a ruler, set square and a pencil. This is a really important button in Access, and it allows us to change the view between our actual table view. Once we save our table, Superheroes, I'm going to make that one word. So now we've named our table. So this is a design view. Again, I can change back into my table view and use the design view button to go back into this. We've got ID, which is an auto number, which is great. I need my superhero name. Superhero name. And the data type for that is going to be short text. So it's just writing we're going to have in there. And we might decide that we want to create a few other fields in there. So adding the rest of the field names. Let's just have a look if we've got those. We've got them here. So we've got superhero ID, superhero name. We've got their age. And again, that's going to be short text. We've got their hair color. So we might want to search for a superhero by their looks. We've got their eye color. And again, that's going to be short text. And gender. And we can add that in. Superpower. Now this one is going to be in our options. We're going to have a yes no field. This is a Boolean field, a yes no field. So that's where we have the little tick box. So yes or no. And we're going to have main type of superpower. And again, that's going to be short text. And we can just click save as we go along, making sure we save our information, save our work. So this is my table in its design view with the different data types. Again, I can click the design view here, and now we see my table as it appears. And I can just go into my table and start filling information in. So I can put in Batman. I'm not sure how old Batman is. I'm going to say he's 28. His hair color is black. His eye color is blue. His gender is male. His superpower, he doesn't have a superpower. And main type of superpower is going to be, I'm just going to say he's brave. So we've got the information in there for our character. As soon as I click in the next one, I can put Robin in. As soon as I start typing in this, you might have noticed that the number here, the unique primary key number, automatically filled in. That's because it is an auto number. So I'm just going to move my database out of the way. So you're going to create the design of your superhero database. And then you can click the design view at the top here and start adding in information for your superheroes. Once you've done that, you need to take a screenshot of your work and add that to your ePortfolio. And in your ePortfolio, you'll see a slide like this where you can add in screenshot of your work. And you can do the same with any records you've then added in your table. You can add a screenshot in there. So you need to go through your database, open up Microsoft Access, which is Microsoft's database, and then you can go through and add information about your superheroes to your database.